The hosts feel it would be a little unkind to present this podcast without just a word of friendly warning. We are about to unfold the story of Frankenstein, a man of science who sought to create a man after his own image without reckoning upon God. It is one of the strangest tales ever told. It deals with the two great mysteries of creation, life and death. I think it will thrill you. It may shock you. It might even horrify you. So if any of you feel that you do not care to subject your nerves to such a strain, now's your chance to. Well, we've warned you. Hello and welcome once again to the Frankencast. I'm the mad scientist Anthony Bowman. My pronouns are he, him. And it's just me again this week. We're doing another Tubi deep dive. And this one is one that I didn't just find on Tubi. It is certainly available on Tubi. But it's one that I'm familiar with and have been thinking about covering for a while. I kind of went back and forth on whether or not this was Frankenstein-y enough. But since I've been kind of doing sort of odds and ends via, what I can find on Tubi, I decided to go ahead and do this. So this week I'm talking about Bride of the Monster by Ed Wood, famed, master of Z-grade horror movies, probably mostly known for either the, sort of biopic directed by Tim Burton starring Johnny Depp, or, also known for Plan 9 from Outer Space, one of the films that is often brought up in conversations about the worst film ever made. And certainly Plan 9 from Outer Space is a crazy mess. It's fun, in that it shows its seams. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about Plan 9 from Outer Space, but if you haven't seen it, it features, it's got Bela Lugosi and it's Vampira, but it's a lot of stuff where scenes were shot at different times in different places with and so it really I believe it's the last Lugosi film, and I think there was a lot where he died before it was finished, so there's a lot of other actors standing in for Lugosi, doing the Dracula, cover the lower half of your face with the cape thing and all that. So it really, that movie certainly shows how low budget it is. And that's sort of, what Ed Wood is known for, is these incredibly low budget and, quote unquote bad movies. But he has more films that are more interesting and less bad, certainly he's not making high concept, high budget films. They are cheap exploitation movies with low budgets. But this film, Bride of the Monster, we've definitely covered much, much worse looking films on this show. Several. And the only reason I kind of was unsure how I wanted to cover this is because the Frankenstein connection is fairly tenuous. It's more mad science. There's a little bit of Frankensteininess to the mad science, but not a ton. But it is an interesting kind of fun thing, and a lot of Ed Wood movies have through lines that carry over between them. And this is certainly in that vein. There is a movie that is considered sort of a sequel to it, although not really in any kind of sense that we would need to cover or anything. But this does star Bela Lugosi as our mad scientist, Dr. Eric Vornov. It also, like many Lugosi films, stars former wrestler Tor Johnson, who, is also famously in Plan 9 from Outer Space, but he also, in several Ed Wood films, plays a character named Lobo. I believe this may be his first portrayal of Lobo, but then, he went on to reprise that character in a few other Ed Wood films, hence the whole sequel thing. There's also a police officer in here, although very minor in this film, Officer Melton, who shows up also in Plan 9 from Outer Space and the sequel that I'm referring to, Night of the Ghouls. In this case, he's really, it's kind of nonsense. Like, he's just in it for a few minutes and then kind of told to, like, fuck off, and he just does. And that's kind of the end of that character. We have other cops who are a bigger part of the film. But yeah. So anyway, this is like the most Frankenstein-y thing Ed Wood did. So it seemed like a fun thing to cover. And if you haven't seen this, it's on Tubi. It's literally on the Wikipedia page for the film. You can watch the whole film for free. There's just it's just plugged in there. So it's very easy. It's extremely public domain. But yeah, if you haven't seen it, certainly it's worth checking out, as well as Plan 9 from Outer Space, even though, it's famously the worst movie ever made, or one of. It's a fun curiosity, and beyond that, obviously the Tim Burton film is quite good as well. In spite of the fact that Johnny Depp is in it, which is just a thing that you have to suffer through when you watch Tim Burton movies for the most part. But yeah, so Bride of the Monster. This is a very atomic age kind of movie. Mid-50s, that kind of era of sci-fi. So yeah, to get into it, we start out with a thunderstorm. Looks like probably some stock footage lightning, and we have two hunters who are caught in the storm, and they're discussing what to do to get out of the rain. And one of them proposes going to a nearby house that is well known it's the Willows house. The whole community sort of in a lot of horror movies, we have the house that everyone in town says is haunted and people don't go there. And, the kid, it's always somebody goes to the house, horror movie shit happens, rinse and repeat. And that's pretty much what we're going to have here. There's rumors that this abandoned house has a monster that lives in it. So, one of the guys is very reluctant to go. The other is it's just a house. It's fine. It's better than being out in the rain or getting struck by lightning. So they finally agree to it. And when they get to the house, right away they can tell someone is living here, which is right away, if I was the guy who was I don't know about going to this weird house, if I got there and someone seemed to be living there in spite of me knowing that it was supposed to be abandoned, that would be get the fuck out time. But no, they knock on the door, and eventually the door's opened and answered by Dr. Vornov, Bela Lugosi, who is really gruff with them. And what do you want? And they're like, oh, we're sorry, we thought the house was empty, we're just trying to get in and out of the rain. And he refuses. He tells them to leave. No one's allowed inside. And then a large, bald, sort of monstrosity of a man comes up behind them, and the hunters see him, and they're like, "Oh, the monster! There really is a monster!" And they run away. And of course, this is Lobo, played by Tor Johnson, and Dr. Varnov thinks this is very funny. He laughs and he's like, "Did you hear that, Lobo? They think you're the monster. Maybe someday they'll meet the real monster." And we just cut to him, to Varnov down in his mad science lab, looking through a glass window into what appears to be an aquarium, a big water tank. And there's an octopus inside, and he is really just loving his octopus. He's kind of giddy, gleeful about this creature. In the context of where we're seeing right now, it's kind of hard to place what we're seeing, other than that it is a real octopus that they're filming. And then we cut to outside where the two hunters are, trying to get away. They're talking about the monster. And then we start like cutting back and forth in a way that like, is sort of a touchstone of an extremely low budget movie, but like done well enough that like right away I knew what they were trying to say, even though we were not actually seeing what they were trying to make us see, which is that we get footage of the real octopus in the tank. Then we also have one of the two hunters kind of slip off of a bank, and so that his lower half is off the frame of the film. We're just seeing like the upper half of him trying to scramble back up a bank. The other hunter is trying to pull him up. He's got his arm and trying to help him up, and he's like screaming, and but we don't see anything below the waist, and then we just keep cutting between these two things. This happening, on this bank, and the octopus obviously in the water tank that we saw, Varnov looking into. But finally, the hunter who is safe on the shore loses his grip. The other guy falls down, and then we finally cut to seeing what was sort of being implied, which is that the hunter has been grabbed by the octopus, and now we see, a giant, bigger than a man rubber octopus that's got tentacles all wrapped around the guy. And this, I believe, if I remember, it's been a long time since I've seen Ed Wood, but like I think there's a scene covering some stuff about Bride of the Monster in the Ed Wood film. And they sort of imply that like this prop, this giant rubber octopus was from an existing movie, and that possibly Ed Wood stole it from like the back lot of a movie production company. But it seems that is not actually true. That Ed Wood did actually legally rent this prop, but it was just in really bad shape and kind of useless, similar to like Bruce the shark from Jaws, but times a million. So this octopus, I think it is supposed to have like moving tentacles, and it doesn't. So we just have like the hunter guy laying on top of this rubber octopus, holding the tentacles with his own hands, and like thrashing about and everything. And actually the fun, so I've not seen this film, but the supposedly this octopus comes from a John Wayne film, a rare non-Western where John Wayne is a sea captain, called Wake of the Red Witch. Interesting. But so we have our hunter, appearing to be like, consumed by what we now know is a very, very large octopus. This is a monster. This is, the title here is when Lugosi's like, they thought you were the monster, Lobo, but they don't, this is the monster. So we have the hunter on the shore firing his rifle at the octopus, trying to save his friend, but then Lobo appears, knocks him out, and then we just cut to him waking up later, strapped to a science slab in Varnov's lab, who is, of course, doing some like classic villain monologue stuff, that, he's got this whole project that he's working on, where he's applying atomic energy to life forms to try to create new, more powerful things. And he tells this hunter, soon you will be big as a giant, with the strength of 20 men, or like the others, dead. And so, they flip switches, we do some mad science stuff. Here, because it's like mid-50s, it's less, lightning and arcing electricity like we get in James Whale movies or Hammer movies. This is a little more scientific. So we have, mainframe computer kind of looking stuff in the background. And the guy is, we don't have money for lightning and sparks and stuff. So he's just kind of like shaking and twitching and everything. And then just kind of stops. So as Varnov said, like the others, this hunter is dead. And Varnov walks off from this experiment, disappointed, goes back over to his glass window and looks in at the octopus, and says, despite his long journeys, my creation always returns home. So he's comforting himself that at least he has this one creation that's a success. And then we get a classic, exposition newspaper headline saying the monster strikes again. We go straight from that to a police station where we have a couple police officers interviewing a vagrant who's not cooperative, who won't, they picked him up in the woods, and he doesn't want to talk. He's like, I'll be out, in 24 hours. And they're like, we can get you for a 72-hour hold for vagrancy. So several of the officers carry him off, and we're left with Officer Kelton, the aforementioned police officer who is really only in this one scene in this film, but appears in a couple other Ed Wood films. We have a newspaper delivery man. I think they even call him a paper boy at some point, but this guy is in his 70s. This is not a paper boy. And he's brought a newspaper for the police chief, but Kelton wants to take it in, and the delivery guy is like, no, the chief said he wants me to hand it directly to him. Every time you get the paper first, you fold it up and crinkle it and everything, and then the captain can't read everything. And Kelton is kind of a dick, and he's like, if you don't leave it with me, I'm gonna give you trouble. I'll take your job away, basically. And the guy's like, I've got a license to do this. And he's like, yeah, but I could probably fudge some stuff and get that expired if I wanted to. So the delivery man finally gives in, gives Kelton the newspaper, and leaves. And Kelton flips through it a little bit and then takes it to the captain. And, he's like, this monster case, put me on this case. I can do good stuff here. And the captain's like, no, I'm not. This case isn't for you. And also, I told the paper guy to bring me the paper directly. And Kelton's like, he tried, so that's it. Kelton leaves. That's a wrap on Kelton for this film. And instead, then we have Detective Craig comes in, and Craig is the one who is actually on the case. They talk about, I think we're up to 12 missing people at this point, including these two hunters. And then suddenly, a woman storms in. She is furious that the police are keeping things from her. We find out she's a reporter. And we also find out that she is Detective Craig's fiance. And so she's especially mad at Craig that he's been hiding from her because he doesn't want to talk to her about the case. And if you know anything about Ed Wood, you might notice that she is wearing an Angora sweater. That will come up again a few times. If you don't know this, Ed Wood had a few fetishes that are sort of well known. One was that he was sort of erotically fascinated with Angora, is the rabbit wool, and also liked to specifically dress up in women's clothes and Angora sweaters and stuff. I think this is the subject of his Glenn or Glinda film. Obviously, not really anything to get too into here, but the sweater is certainly there on purpose. This is when you get the foot shot in a Tarantino film. It's there on purpose for sure. So we have this whole sort of scene where the captain and Detective Craig are talking to Janet. This is Craig's fiance, and they insist we know just as much as you do. You have all of the information. In fact, you have more information than we do, in that you have made up information that you keep claiming it's a monster. You keep writing news articles saying that there's a monster, and there's no such thing as monsters. So, by fabricating this, you have manufactured more information than is actually available. And so she, is like, well, if you all aren't going to tell me anything, if you're not going to help me, I'll do investigating on my own. And she storms out, and both Craig and the detective are like, she wouldn't go out into the marsh by herself, would she? And I was like, well, I don't know. She's determined and crazy enough that she might just do it. But we cut away from them to her, and rather than going into the swamp, she goes back to the office of the newspaper and wants to look through, old news articles about the issue, and specifically, she's looking for property records. And she looked through some stuff. She's talking to like a secretary in the office, this older lady, and she's like, okay, I got what I need. Can you call Craig and cancel our date tonight? Tell him I'm sick, or tell him whatever. It doesn't matter, but I'm busy. And the secretary's like, okay, I got it. I can handle that. And then we cut back to the police station where we have this professor show up, and he is an expert on, cryptozoology, it seems like. We'll get his name is Stravsky, and he recently spent a lot of time at Loch Ness researching the Loch Ness Monster, and even though he never saw it, he has a lot of eyewitness statements that he collected, and he believes the Loch Ness Monster is real. And, so of course, Craig and the captain are like, well, so you think that the Loch Ness Monster just, swam across the ocean and came over here to scare off people around us? And Stravsky's like, no, of course not. But, there may be something similar, and I'd like to look into it. And the captain's like, okay, well, Craig was going to look into this as well. Maybe you guys can team up and you can use your expertise and you can have the protection of a police officer and it'll be great. And Stravsky's like, okay, let's do it. How about tomorrow morning? And both of the cops are like, but the monster always attacks at night. Stravsky's like, well, let's do our research first. We'll find out what we can in the daylight and then talk about being out at night. So everybody agrees this is what we're going to do. Stravsky leaves and the captain's like, keep an eye on him. He's something suspicious about this guy. And Craig's like, oh yeah, I clocked that for sure. And Craig's like, well, I guess I'll see you tomorrow then. I'm heading out. And Captain's like, you think you got a date? And Craig's like, yeah, I got a date. And he's like, nah, the secretary at the paper called, and she's sick or something, whatever, but she's not going on a date with you tonight. And Craig's like, man, if she went out in there, he's like, I'll put her over my knee if it's the last thing I do. So we get a little casual, misogyny here, common for the 50s. And we cut away from them to Janet out in the woods as predicted. And she sees like a giant snake and is instantly terrified and just faints. So things aren't going well for her. And then even worse, Lobo finds her and drags her away. And then we just cut to her waking up in Varnoff's lab, also strapped down to the same slab that the hunter was strapped down to earlier. And, she wakes up and is like, where am I? Who are you? And Varnoff introduces himself, and then he's like, but we can talk about this later. You just need your rest now. You're getting very sleepy. And we get what you would expect if you manage to pull an aging Bela Lugosi into your low-budget film. We get a close-up of Lugosi's eyes, very similar to the shot you often see from White Zombie, that's been reused all over the place. And then we get Lugosi with his signature Dracula hand motions, and he hypnotizes her, and she falls back asleep. And then we cut to the next morning where Craig is out in the woods now, and he's not with Stravsky. He's with another police officer. Marty is this guy's name. Why it's, not our, previously depicted, police officer from the, we don't have Kelton. He's gone. We just have Marty, some guy. And they are searching the woods for Stravsky, they were supposed to meet. But then they happen upon a car abandoned, and this is Janet's car. So that is concerning. Craig is freaked out. There's no evidence of Janet around it. There's just a car in the middle of the woods. And Marty's like, there's like a coffee shop a few miles back. Let's just turn around, go there, see if they saw her, see if she's there, maybe make some calls, see what we can figure out. Obviously, pre-cell phone, we got to go to a place and make calls. So they head back that way, and then we see that Strovsky is also here in the swamp area by himself, and looking around. But we just like have, a quick shot of him getting out of his car, looking around, and then we go back to Craig and Marty at the coffee shop. They've called around. Nobody's seen Janet since yesterday. And the last person he's talking to is the chief. And the chief's like, I'll run with this. I'll send people out. I'll ask around. In the meantime, you're already out in the swamp. Go back, look for Strovsky. We'll take care of Janet from here. Craig is just like, okay, which seems wild. Like, I feel like in all of these kinds of stories, this would be a cop who's like, no, I'm not going to follow orders. I'm going to look for my girlfriend. Understandably so, right? But no, here he's like, sure, you say go back into the swamp, I'll do it. So we cut away from that to Janet still in the lab. She wakes up again. Lobo and Varnoff are bringing her a tray of food. And Lobo is like weirdly drawn to her. And I can't remember exactly when it happens, but I think in this scene, like he tries to like kind of caress her and she pulls away and he ends up ripping a chunk of her sweater off. And if it's not this scene, it's like the next one. But for the rest of the movie, after he ends up with this chunk, he has it like kind of tucked into the waistband of his pants. Like he seems to have an Ed Wood type fascination with the feeling of Angora. So we, as this is happening, like Varnoff ends up having to like actually like pull out a whip and whip Lobo to get him to leave her alone. And so once Lobo leaves the room, Varnoff talks to her again, and she's like, "Who are you?" And he's like, "We went through this last night." And she's like, "Did we? I don't remember that." And he's like, "Yeah, I'm Eric Varnoff." And she's like, "Oh, yes, I recognize that name." And he's like, "You do?" And she said, "Yeah, I'm a reporter. I was doing research and I looked up property records on this house and, found your name there." And then he calls her Mrs. I forget her last name, or Miss. But like we have this whole sort of sparring match between them where they both know more than they're letting on, and they kind of like slowly tease it out of each other. But eventually, Varnoff gets tired of her, hypnotizes her back to sleep, has Lobo carry her out again. Meanwhile, Strovsky has now also found the house, and he sneaks inside. So he's looking around, and Lobo pops out, and it looks like Lobo's going to attack him, but no. Then Varnoff appears as well, and we find that Varnoff and Strovsky know each other. It's like, hello, old friend, that kind of thing. And we find that Strovsky has been chasing Varnoff across the world. Like, he keeps getting to where Varnoff previously was, just a little bit too late. And it's pretty clear that, like, Varnoff has been, he's doing the mad science thing here of, like, being like trying something, and things going wrong, and then being exiled from a place, and then moving on. This very like Dr. Moreau, but so eventually, like this whole thing with the Loch Ness monster in this film, Varnoff is responsible for the Loch Ness monster, but he ran away before Strovsky could find him again there. But now they finally caught up, and Strovsky is like, I've been chasing you, I've been reading up on all the stuff you're doing. I'm fascinated. Like, your experiments in atomic energy are incredible and impressive, and it's time to come home. And Varnoff's like, no, I was exiled from my homeland. I was separated from my family. I lost my wife and my child. And Stravsky's like, well, that's all in the past now. Just come home. And again, Varnoff's like, no, my life was ruined because no one would believe in my work. And now suddenly you're interested in it. Home, I have no home. We get a monologue from Lugosi here that's pretty good. Like, I think some people kind of poke fun at it because it's like he's chewing the scenery pretty hard here. He's like, my home is the jungle, and it's great. I loved it. But he ends up basically being like, soon I will have great power. I will be able to do whatever I want. And Stravsky's like, yes, come home and our country will soon rule the world. And Varnov's like, no, fuck you guys. Like, you ruined my life. I'll rule the world. You will be under my feet. And Stravsky pulls a gun and is like, I'm done asking nicely. You're coming with me. We're going back to we never say the country's name. It's just, fictional, Eastern European country. But of course, Varnoff is like, just kind of nods at Lobo, who comes up behind Stravsky and knocks him out. The gun threat was pretty toothless. And then Lobo just drags Stravsky down into the lab and throws him into the octopus tank. And we get another really great scene where we have this Stravsky actor who's been a fairly good actor through this. Like, he's kind of minor character, but he is also forced to lay atop the rubber octopus and writhe around and scream and flail the octopus's tentacles because it can't do it itself. Very, like, it's the best they could do with the money they had, and it's a little hilarious, but, charming. Meanwhile, we go back to the woods where the cops have now found, where Craig and Marty have found Stravsky's abandoned car, and they're like, okay, he must be nearby too. Let's split up so we can cover more ground. So Marty goes one direction. Craig by himself is immediately sucked into quicksand, like up to his waist. And then immediately an alligator appears to menace, threaten him. And he is able to kind of keep the gator at bay by just firing wildly with his pistol, and is able to eventually climb his way out of the muck. This is the kind of thing that, like, this movie is an hour and 8 minutes long. It is, which is pretty common for Ed Wood films. I think that this is like alligator stock footage, so it probably is useful to pad the runtime, but it's also like completely unrelated to the film, other than that, like, we're in a swamp and there's treacherous stuff to deal with. This feels like the kind of touch that you don't get from this kind of movie. Like, there's no real reason for this scene in terms of furthering the plot, which often in a movie with this low of a budget, that's all we got time for. It's just moving the plot along. But no, I liked this alligator scene just because it was like, oh, we're doing a thing. We're trying something. We're going to, escalate the tension here. And, obviously Craig's going to get out because he has to go rescue Janet. We know all of this. But, having this little bit of an extra scene here, I liked it. I thought it was nice. But we cut away from after he escapes back to the newspaper office where the police chief shows up and talks to the secretary, and they have great banter. This scene between them is really good. Like, they're both real snippy with each other, and well, why didn't you say so? And it's kind of like he's like really demanding of information, and she's like, if you asked that before all this small talk, but like there's been no small talk, and but just really great stuff here, really good. But ultimately, the point of the scene, of course, is that the chief is trying to, as he told Craig he was going to do, he's digging into Janet's whereabouts, and finds that probably the secretary is the last person to have seen her, and he finds out that she was researching property records, and specifically, this abandoned house. And so he is able to look at the same records because she hasn't filed them away. And he's like, okay. So now he has Varnoff's name, and we immediately get him calling like I need anything you can find about Varnoff, Dr. Eric Varnoff. So they're doing that kind of research, and then we cut from this back to Varnoff in the house, he's like in his lab, and he's doing his like hand motion again, using hypnotism to call forth Janet from a room off screen. She comes walking in a wedding dress, and seems like in a trance. And at the same time that this is happening, we see upstairs Craig has found the house and also just kind of like strolled in, similar to Stravsky earlier. So he's searching the first floor. Meanwhile, down in the lab, Varnoff is whipping Lobo and forcing him to strap Janet down. And Lobo is, resistant to doing this because he has this infatuation with her and he doesn't want to hurt her. But upstairs, Craig finds just like a file folder with just a bunch of like photos of Varnoff. Why he has a detective photo array of himself is unclear, but he immediately from there finds the secret passage through the fireplace leading down into the lab. But before he can get down there, we cut back to Varnoff doing another villain monologue at Janet. And she soon will be the bride of the atom. This is the next step in his experimentation. And she's like, no, the newspaper knows where I am. You won't get away with this. And he's like, oh yes, I will, because as soon as I turn you, I'll be on the road. I've been bouncing around the globe doing this for a while now, and no one's caught me, and I'm just going to keep moving. But that's when Craig appears, and he has his gun drawn and is like, let her go. And Varnoff is smart enough to, he puts his hands up and he's like, oh yes, you've got the advantage for now. I'll do what you say. But then, Lobo sneaks up behind Craig, of course, and knocks him out. And then we cut back to outside where I think 2 police cars just packed with cops appear, including the chief. And it's like, they're going to raid the house. They know that the house is the central, location for everything that's been going on. So we have that going on. And then we see back down in the lab, Varnoff has gotten Craig chained up to the wall so that he can watch what's going to happen to Janet. So Varnoff goes over and starts flipping switches to blast Janet with this atomic radiation. And this is when we see Lobo pull that scrap of Angora out of his belt, and he kind of pets it like... It reminded me of like Lenny from Of Mice and Men with the rabbit. But he's again revealing his infatuation with Janet. He can't let Varnoff go through with it, so he knocks out Varnoff, goes over, breaks the straps on the slab, freeing Janet, and he starts kind of trying to pet her as well. And she's just kind of frozen with fear. But then he gets up and goes over. Lobo leaves her and goes over to Varnoff, picks him up. So we have Janet who rushes over, while Lobo is picking up Varnoff, Janet gets the gun that Craig dropped, goes over to Craig, puts it in his holster, and then starts working on getting the cuffs undone. And Lobo, meanwhile, has taken Varnoff and laid him on the slab and strapped him down. And starts going over and flipping switches. And Craig's like, no, as wrong as what Varnoff is doing, we can't let him just kill him. So we've got to stop this. So once Janet gets him free, he starts firing at Lobo, and he is just not fazed by the bullets at all. So they get into a physical altercation, and Lobo just fucks Craig up, tears his shirt off of him and just throws him around like a rag doll. So then Lobo goes back to what he was doing, starts flipping switches and everything. Janet kind of pulls the very beaten Craig over to the side, and Varnoff wakes up just in time to realize what's happening and gets blasted with atomic energy. And then we see, upstairs, the cops have now also broken into the house, and they're here to find everyone. But downstairs, Varnoff is now, he's been irradiated. He is not turned in giant or anything visibly changed about him, but he is much stronger. He breaks the straps on the slab, stands up, goes over and attacks Lobo. And a lot of this scene is shot from the back of Varnoff. I feel like this is probably a stunt double. I suspect that Lugosi probably didn't have this in him, but we have Lugosi and Lobo start fighting, and they kind of throw each other around a lot, and then we have in the chaos, they of course set the lab on fire, as we always do in these sort of grand conclusions to these kind of monster movies. And Varnoff, I guess Lobo gets killed in this, or knocked unconscious or something. Varnoff picks Janet up and carries her out in like the classic, monster pose, leaving Craig, who manages to wake up on his own and escape. Meanwhile, upstairs, the cops see the smoke and they evacuate. And so they're out in the front yard. They see Varnoff carrying Janet, and they're like, but like off in the distance, they're like, what's that? And then Craig runs out and he's like, that's Janet, we got to get her. And cops start pulling guns, and he's like, no, that's Janet, you can't shoot, just follow him. So they start chasing after, and at some point Varnoff, I guess, decides that having Janet is a liability. He sets her down and continues on, and the cops are just like unloading their pistols at this point. Again, similar to Lobo, seems to have no impact. So we have Craig manages to get up on top of a hill and roll this giant, perfectly round Indiana Jones boulder down a hill that crashes into Varnoff and knocks him, of course, into the swamp, where he is also attacked by our giant rubber octopus. And so now we have Lugosi rolling around, doing the whole same thing. But this time it's a little different because the storm is still going on outside, and the octopus gets struck by lightning. And because it's an atomic octopus and an atomic man, the lightning somehow ignites, and the whole thing explodes in a huge mushroom cloud. But somehow, even though all of our other heroes or whatever are pretty close by, we see the mushroom cloud, and then we just see the police chief and Craig and Janet all standing over there to the side, and the chief says, "He tampered in God's domain." And then we go to credits. So that's Bride of the Monster. Yeah, I mean, it's, like I said, it's a fairly slight film. It's not great, but it's pretty great for an Ed Wood film. I know that a lot of people think of that as being a pretty low bar. But I think, special effects wise, it's a little better than most. The budget seems a little higher and seems pretty well spent. And it's before the really later ones where Lugosi seemed, barely scraping by. He's still giving something in this movie. Like, I think Lugosi's really good. I think he definitely carries it, but I think everybody in this is doing good stuff. And it's a fun sort of, nuclear scare movie, which is obviously one of the big themes of like horror, sci-fi exploitation, from this time period. So yeah, I don't know. I would recommend checking this one out. Like, Ed Wood's not for everybody, but I think this is a better Ed Wood than you usually get. So, yeah, check it out. And, like I said, it's the Frankensteininess is tenuous, but like, I think, obviously our Lobo character is not really he's just a guy. He's not a monster in any way. And he is sort of the thing that is the undoing of our mad scientist. So that's, I don't know. I guess the mad scientist does ultimately end up getting drowned by his own octopus monster. So that does feel there's no pathos in the octopus monster. There's no sympathetic character there. But I think the nuclear stuff is what's really the Frankenstein element in here, right? Like this is Ed Wood warning us that, when it's at the end, he tampered in God's domain. It's telling us to stop with the fucking nuclear weaponry. That this is our Frankenstein moment. We're gonna keep toying with this science until we bring about the end of all civilization. And we had our whole extended Cold War period, and maybe things cooled off for a little bit here or there, but we've still kind of been in this this mindset ever since. There's still nuclear weapons out there. There's still always the possibility that that our monster is going to rise up and destroy us all and destroy the planet. So yeah, I think that's definitely the message here. As most of the nuclear panic stuff, including obviously like Godzilla being like the prime example. But all of those movies that we did Matinee recently with Mant, and that's very much a part of that film, in conversation with the films of the past. And this is right in there with Mant. This is the kind of movie Mant is, giant animal, etc. So yeah, it's worth checking out. It's it's not like a masterpiece like Godzilla. It's not even like of the quality of like Them or something, the giant ant movie that Mant was also sort of nodding to. But still fun and worthwhile. And I love Ed Wood movies. I find them charming. They're kind of janky and weird, from a guy who just kept trying. Like, he just kept putting it all out there, even though he was a weirdo with no money. He just made connections. He fucking got Bela Lugosi in most of his movies, and that's pretty cool. Like, I think it's really great what he did, and I think it's pretty cool that he's still in the conversation. People still talk about Ed Wood. Obviously Tim Burton was paying tribute to him with his film. I just can't help but find it inspiring when when a weirdo works really hard to make a thing that they care about a lot, and it gets traction. I think even during Ed Wood's life, he kind of knew that some people thought his stuff was ridiculous, but people were seeing it, and that's pretty cool. Obviously I try to make a lot of things, and I put them out into the world and hope that they connect with some people, whether it's this podcast or the book or music that I make or whatever. Like, the making of it is enough for me. But it is cool when it, finds an audience and it finds people that, it means something to. So, good on Ed Wood for continuing to do his thing, having fun, making movies, telling stories, in this case, getting a little bit of a message across. Like, that's all really, really inspiring to me. So yeah, I think that's all I've got to say about this one. Thank you all for listening. As always, you can find us on all the socials at The Frankencast. You can email us at thefrankencast@gmail.com. We're also over on YouTube. And of course, you can always find us at patreon.com/thefrankencast, where there's all kinds of fun other stuff over there. You can find episodes, more solo episodes with just me. You can find stuff with me and Hayden, me and Eric, etc. Hayden and I just did a porn parody, which are some of our more popular episodes, and he finally got to do one of those. We had a lot of fun with that, but there's still, past ones with Eric. There's comic book talk, there's TV shows, there's the Munsters, there's something for everybody over there, so we'd love to have you over there. And as far as next week, as promised, Hayden will be back, and we will continue with the Monster Family 2-part series. So we'll find out what happens in Monster Family 2. We're both sort of waiting on pins and needles to find out how they managed to make a sequel to a story that felt completely wrapped up, especially when the original was a huge box office bomb. So we're I wouldn't even say cautiously optimistic. We are cautious, but we're looking forward to it. It should be a fun episode no matter what. So join us next week as we talk about Monster Family 2. And until then, to be continued.
Looks like you've survived another episode. The Freaking Cast is a production of FCR Media. It's hosted by Anthony Bowman, Eric Velasquez, and Hayden Orr. Follow us online at The Freaking Cast. Or send us a letter at thefreakingcast@gmail.com. Our cover art is by Amanda Keller. You can find her at Keller Illustrations on Instagram. Our theme music is by Vivek Abhishek. Thanks for listening.